Once upon a time, in the vibrant city of Abuja, where majestic buildings stood as a testament to progress and the air hummed with ambition, lived a man named Mr. Johnson. He was a titan of industry, a name whispered with reverence and awe throughout the nation's capital. He wasn't just wealthy, he was the wealthiest person in Abuja. His grand estate sprawled across the serene outskirts, a majestic symbol of his success. He owned countless buildings and a colossal company that was the envy of every businessman. But for all his riches, his greatest treasure was his family, his loving wife and their 3 children. The children were his pride and joy. There was Tony, the firstborn, a boy with an easy smile and an even easier life. Everyone knew he was the heir to the Johnson family fortune, destined to take over his father's empire. Then came James, the second son. He was the quiet one, often found with a book in his hand rather than a sports car key. He was thoughtful and humble, a stark contrast to his older brother. The youngest was Helen, their lively little sister, whose charm and spirited nature brought light to their home. Their lives were a perfect fairy tale until a dark cloud cast a shadow over their world. Mr. Johnson's beloved wife, the very heart of their family, passed away after a long and painful battle with cancer. Losing his wife was the hardest thing Mr. Johnson ever faced. The grief was a heavy weight, but he knew he had to be strong for his children. He dedicated himself to raising them alone, pouring every ounce of his love into their lives. He spoiled them, perhaps a little too much, especially Tony, the oldest son and heir. Tony's every whim was met with a new toy, a new gadget, a new car. He grew up believing the world was his for the taking, and his father's money was a bottomless well from which he could drink forever. 22 years passed in the blink of an eye. The children had grown into adults, each on a different path. Tony was now a man, but he still lived with the carefree, entitled attitude of a teenager. His life was a blur of loud, extravagant parties, where champagne flowed like water and music blared until dawn. He bought new sports cars on a whim and flaunted his family's endless wealth to a circle of friends who were really just vultures drawn to his money. He was a symbol of unearned privilege, a man who saw no need to work because his father had worked for him. James, in contrast, was a different kind of man. He saw a future that wasn't just about spending money, but about earning it. He had a deep hunger for knowledge and a desire to build something of his own. He went abroad to study, not just to get a fancy degree, but to truly learn the inner workings of business. He took on internships and worked for others, wanting to understand the gears and levers of a company from the ground up. Mr. Johnson, seeing a reflection of his own ambition in James, encouraged him. "It is good to learn from others before you lead yourself," he would say. Helen, the youngest, had a bit of Tony's swagger. She could be a little rude and loved to show off, but she had a soft spot for James. He was the only one who could get her to listen and think twice about her actions. Time, however, is a relentless force. The years of building his empire and the stress of a lonely life had worn Mr. Johnson down. He fell very sick, a shadow of the powerful man he once was. The family gathered around his sickbed, the silence of the grand house punctuated only by his labored breathing. One sad afternoon, with his children by his side, Mr. Johnson took his last breath. He was gone. The entire family mourned the loss of a legend. His burial was a grand affair, attended by all the important people, a testament to his legacy. The family received condolences from everyone, and the day ended in a quiet celebration of a life well lived. The very next day, a sense of quiet dread hung in the air. The lawyer, Mr. Akin, a man with a serious face and an unshakable calm, arrived at the Johnson estate. It was time to read the will. In the grand living room, with paintings of ancestors watching from the walls, Tony sat with a smug smile on his face. He sat like a king ready to take his throne. This was his birthright. He had been preparing for this moment his whole life, or at least he thought he had. James and Helen sat with him, quiet and respectful. Mr. Akin cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the silent room. He began to read from the thick document. I, Johnson Edward, being of sound mind, do hereby make, publish, and declare this to be my last will and testament. The words were heavy with meaning. To my beautiful daughter, Helen, I leave an annual allowance. Spend it wisely, for if you do not, you will lose it all. You have your brother to teach you that. Helen looked at James, a hint of surprise on her face. Then, the lawyer continued, his voice steady. In terms of my real estate, my buildings, the company, and everything under my control, I hereby leave it in the hands of my son. Tony couldn't wait for him to finish. He stood up with a triumphant grin, ready to shake the lawyer's hand, to accept his destiny. But Mr. Akin looked at him and then turned his gaze to James. He finished his sentence, his voice a quiet finality. James Edward. The room seemed to shake. A pin could have dropped and sounded like a thunderclap. Tony's triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer confusion and disbelief. There must be a mistake, he yelled, his voice echoing in the silent room. It's supposed to be me. I am the first son. Mr. Akin remained calm, his expression unchanged. There is no mistake, Tony. Your father knew you were the first son. He also knew you were incompetent. The only message he left for you, a separate instruction, is that you are to work under your brother, to learn and to help him, instead of spending money so extravagantly. He said you have a good heart, but no wisdom for business. He believed James could teach you. James sat frozen, the words hitting him like a wave. He never imagined his father would leave everything to him. He knew Tony was not fit to run the company, but this was a shock. He looked at his brother, his face a mask of rage and hurt. James, always the peacemaker, tried to calm the situation. Tony, please, he said softly. Our father knew you would destroy this business. I'm begging you, let's work together. We can preserve his legacy, just like he did. But Tony was a storm of hatred. The betrayal cut deeper than any words. He couldn't stand the idea of his younger brother, the one who was always in his shadow, now being in charge of everything. The very idea of having to work for James, to take orders from him, was an insult. Tony swore in his heart he would do everything he could to make James's life a living hell. He stormed out of the house, leaving a heavy silence behind. He went to his sports car, a sleek red Ferrari he had bought just last week, and drove away, a dangerous glint in his eyes. The next month, James was officially made the CEO of the Johnson conglomerate. He poured his heart and soul into the work, spending long hours at the office, meeting with clients, and making sure the company's reputation was not only maintained, but also improved. He cut back on unnecessary expenses, modernized the operations, and invested in new technologies, all things Tony would have never considered. While James was busy building, Tony was busy drinking. His fancy cars were repossessed one by one. His friends, the vultures who had once flocked to him, vanished as his money dried up. He spent his days in a dark, smoky bar on the bad side of town, a bottle of cheap whiskey his only companion. The hatred in his eyes grew with every sip. He couldn't believe his father would do this to him. How could he, the great Tony Johnson, work under his little brother? It was an abomination. But he had no choice. His extravagant lifestyle had left him broke, and now the only way to get back to the good life was to swallow his pride and go to work. When James heard his brother was coming to work for him, he felt a flicker of hope. He thought maybe this was the chance for them to reconnect, to heal the rift between them. He gave Tony a nice, fancy office, a spacious corner room with a big window overlooking the city. He put him in charge of managing the company's incoming and outgoing transactions, a crucial role. "You'll be able to see everything that comes in and goes out, Tony," James said with a hopeful smile. "It's a big responsibility, but you can do it. We'll start with this, and then you can take on more." Tony sat in his fancy new office for exactly 3 days. He hated it. The work was boring, repetitive, and demanded effort, something he hadn't put in his whole life. He would bail out of work, sneaking away to go to parties, always lashing out at the workers who came into his office. He would make them work extra hours, doing his job, while he sat back, scrolling through his phone, or talking to his friends about how much he hated his life. He was a tyrant, a lazy one. All the while, James was either out of the country, finalizing business deals, or in meetings that would help the company grow. The complaints started small. A whisper here, a nervous glance there. Then one day, it all came to a head. A young employee, looking terrified, came into James's office. She was a new hire, and she was close to tears. She stammered out a story of how Tony had humiliated her in front of everyone, mocking her for a small mistake and making her do a menial task. James promised to fix it. He tried talking to his brother gently, but it was like talking to a brick wall. The complaints kept coming, getting more and more visible. One afternoon, James decided to face his brother directly. He walked into Tony's office and found him on the phone, laughing loudly. He hung up when he saw James. "What's up, little brother? Come to bow down to your king." Tony sneered. James ignored the taunt. "Tony, we need to talk. The workers are complaining. They say you are giving them a hard time and making them do your work." Tony's face hardened. "And? Let them complain. They're beneath us. They're mere workers compared to us. We're Johnsons. They're lucky to even work for us. They should be grateful. What are you going to do? Fire me? You can't. Fathers won't let you." He sat back in his chair, a smug look on his face. James felt a mix of disappointment and pity. He had hoped Tony would change, even a little, but he hadn't. James knew he couldn't fire him, so he decided to give him another chance. He thought, at least he's trying. At least he is coming to the office, even if he is just sitting there. But Tony never learned. His behavior got worse. He became more arrogant, more spiteful. The final straw came a few weeks later. James was walking through the office when he saw Tony arguing with an old woman who worked as a janitor. She was Mama Nancy, a kind, gentle soul who had been working for the Johnson family for years. Tony was screaming at her, claiming she had not cleaned his office properly. James was about to intervene when Tony did something unthinkable. He raised his hand and slapped the old woman across the face. Her glasses fell to the ground and broke, and she stood there, her eyes wide with shock and pain. James saw red. He ran to the scene. "What did you just do, Tony?" he roared, his voice filled with a fury he didn't know he had. Tony didn't flinch. "She was disrespectful. She didn't clean my office right." James stepped between them, his body a shield for the trembling old woman. "This is the last time, Tony. You will never, ever lay a hand on anyone in this company again. Is that clear?" Tony's eyes narrowed. He was stunned. How could his little brother, the one he had always bossed around, talk to him like that? In front of the very people he considered beneath them? Tony couldn't believe it. He stormed out of the office, his heart now a dark, twisted knot of hatred and revenge. He walked down the street, calling his friend Mark, a shady character he had met at a bar. "I'm going to end him," he said. "I'm going to make him pay for this." That evening, as James was driving home, a dark car cut him off on an isolated road. Before he knew what was happening, his car was surrounded, his door was yanked open, and a hand clamped over his mouth. Terrified, he was pulled out and pushed into the other car. He woke up in a dark, dusty, uncompleted building in the middle of nowhere. He was alone, tied up. The masked men around him didn't say a word. They didn't ask for money or a ransom. They just looked at him with cold, empty eyes. It was a situation James had never imagined in his life. He begged for mercy, his voice a shaky whisper, but they just stared. He was sure he was going to die. But as fate would have it, James was lucky. Just as the masked men were preparing to do their worst, the sirens of police cars filled the air. They panicked. 3 of them managed to escape, disappearing into the darkness, but one of them was caught. James was rescued, scared but unharmed. The police took him to the station to give his statement. As the police were questioning the captured kidnapper, he confessed everything. He told them about the man who had hired them to kidnap James. He told them that the man had not asked for money. He had just wanted James gone for good. And the person that alerted the police about it all was the janitor Mama Nancy, who overheard Tony on the call in the bathroom when he wanted to do her work. The police, using the information, made their way to a bar in Abuja where they found a very drunk Tony. They arrested him. He was shocked, asking what they were doing, that they had no right to do this to him. They told him he was being arrested for conspiracy to kidnap and murder his brother. Tony's face went pale. He couldn't believe it. When James heard the news, his heart shattered. His own brother had tried to kill him. It was a betrayal so deep it cut to his very soul. He was also surprised to find out how the police had been tipped off. It wasn't a random call. It was Mama Nancy, the janitor. She had been on her duty working in the bathroom when she overheard a phone call. It was Tony on the phone, his voice filled with fury, talking to someone about ending the CEO's life as he went home. She knew he meant James. Even though she was afraid, she went to the police and told them everything. Her courage saved James's life. James went to the station. He saw Tony in the holding cell, his face a mix of fear and rage. Tony saw him and yelled, "You did this. This is your fault." James shook his head slowly, a single tear rolling down his cheek. He felt nothing but a profound sadness. He had tried to help his brother, to mend their relationship, but Tony's hatred had been a poison that had consumed him completely. There was nothing left of the person he once knew. James looked at the police officer and nodded. He knew what he had to do. He let the law take its course. He allowed them to take his brother to face the consequences of his actions. And that was the end. James was left with a company to run, a father's legacy to protect, and a brother he had lost forever. The one who had been given everything had ended up with nothing.
And so, the moral lesson to learn from the Johnson family closed with a lesson carved deep in stone, that money without wisdom is a curse, and pride without humility leads only to destruction. Tony, who once had everything, lost it all because he refused to learn, while James, who sought knowledge and carried humility, preserved his father's empire. In the end, it was clear true inheritance is not measured in wealth but in character, discipline, and the choices we make when life tests us. Tony's downfall was a warning that arrogance can turn blessings into burdens, while James's rise was proof that patience and integrity turn trials into triumphs. And in the quiet courage of Mama Nancy, we see that greatness lies not in riches, but in doing what is right, no matter the risk. The Johnson story reminds us, character outlives fortune. Dear viewers, what do you think about this story? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and share it with friends. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks, and see you in the next video. Bye!